This program is brought to you by Emory University.
I'm Robert Bruce Logue, Jr. I was born January 26, 1946 at Emory Hospital. Grew up in Brookwood Hills, went to E. Rivers School through the 5th grade, then transferred to Westminster, where I graduated in 1964. I then went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Graduated in 1968 and did a short, or else 6-year stint in the Army Reserves, and then got in the real estate business in 1970, and am still in the real estate business, leasing industrial buildings for Avis and Young, and plan to continue working as long as I'm healthy and having fun.
Okay, I'm Carolyn, Logue Leasing, and I was born in 1942 at Emory Hospital and grew up in Ansley Park. And then we moved to Brookwood Hills, so I went to E. Rivers, like Bruce, and then to Westminster, and then to Randolph-Macon Women's College, and then the University of North Carolina. Even though Mother and Daddy would love if we'd gone to Emory, we chose not to go to Emory. But I got married right after college, and so we've lived in Atlanta ever since. And we have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. I teach business etiquette and ballroom dancing and manners, which our parents would love because they loved dancing. They took ballroom dancing lessons and were very, very good dancers. So I've carried that tradition on. So I'm still working until I get tired of it and can't do it and can't dance anymore. Well, I think I really wanted to be away from home. I think I was really a homebody and probably needed to branch out.
I really was either going to go to the University of Georgia or University of North Carolina, and later learned that Emory would have been free, so that probably would have been a better option.
It would, and they didn't tell us. I don't think they said, till I was at Randolph-Macon, I was complaining about it, and they said, well, come to Emory, it won't cost us anything. I didn't really know that until then. Maybe I would have made a wiser decision, but maybe not.
We grew up knowing about the Emory Clinic, and would go over to visit occasionally and have lunch. And then we both worked. I worked at the hospital in the summer of 1962 as a gopher in the business office, and Carolyn worked in the clinic.
In the medical records. Mm-hmm. I was down there just in that summer. But I think Emory was like part of our family, because Daddy going to undergraduate school, graduate school, and working at Emory, it was just a part of our lives that we knew about. And actually, I did not know how famous Daddy was until I went to college. In 1960, I was at Randolph-Macon, and people would say, I've heard of your father. He's a great cardiologist. And, I didn't really know it. Did you, Bruce?
I didn't really know it until he and Dr. Hurst published the book. But I remember them being in our living room on Sunday nights, putting the book together. But when it was published, which I think was 1965 or 66, I thought, wow, he wrote a book, so he must be famous. Well, I remember practically every Sunday night, Dr. Hurst would come over, and they would be in the the dining room and the living room with a lot of papers, and I was supposed to be quiet. And so they kind of shut me off in the house where I couldn't bother anybody. But those were my early memories. And then I was probably a freshman or sophomore in college when the book was actually published, and we all got copies, this copy. And so I proudly displayed it in my apartment.
Oh, you did?
Although I never really opened it or read any of it. But those were my memories of the book.
Yeah, I just remember Dr. Hurst being at our house a lot, working on that. But Daddy worked a lot anyway. He was hardly ever he was either in his study surrounded by medical books, medical journals, or at work. And I couldn't talk on the phone because seemed like he was always on call, and you couldn't talk on the phone very much back in those days when you had one phone number. A lot about work.
But after Carolyn went off to college, they got me my own phone line.
They did?
Because I talked on the phone a lot in high school. So yeah, I had my own private line.
Would you open it so we can see the inscription?
Yeah.
What does it say?
It says to Carolyn, much love. Can't read it. Daddy, March of 1966.
Well, and I don't know if they still, I don't know if they kept this inscription here, but I think this is so sweet. To the dedication to our wives, Neely Wiley Hurst and Carolyn Clements Logue. I think that's really sweet.
Yeah.
And they should have put it in there.
Because
They did, the wives were very supportive, and the men, it was back when the husband had the job and the wife had the children. And they worked hard.
Yeah. But they also entertained a lot.
They had the fellows, Daddy had I think he had 100 fellows. He established the first fellowship in cardiology, and we constantly had the fellows to dinner. It would be, tonight we're having this big group of fellows.
Outside in the backyard with a cookout.
At our home. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's when we knew we were going to be eating very well.
when the fellows were coming.
Yeah. And he was, by the way, a gourmet cook.
Your dad.
Yes. Great cook. So that's about all I remember, really, about the book.
Okay.
Well, he was born in Augusta, and he went to school there, but then his father was with Postal Telegraph, and they moved to Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, so he went to school there.
Went to Landon High School.
He did.
Yeah.
And then he came to Emory and went to undergraduate school and graduate school. He went to Montreal at some point after medical school, but then he came back to Atlanta.
He was in a hospital
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Royal Victoria.
That's right.
I think. Yeah. And then came back to Emory.
He had friends who had other specialties, and he was focusing on cardiology, and they felt like it would be good to have a group where people could get more information than just on one specialty. So I really think that's how they got together. I just remember Mother would say, Bruce, I wish Bruce would go into private practice, but he will not leave Emory. He wants to teach. He wants to be part of all this teaching. He really loved the teaching. Well, we were really close to the Schroeders, Spalding Schroeder. And it seemed like every Sunday afternoon we went to their house. We went a lot. They lived way out in the country. And they had a lake.
They had a lake.
And we would go out there and swim and
swim all day and then go in and
have dinner.
And then we would play, and I think they would play bridge.
They
while
might have.
We were outside, and it did seem like we were there every Sunday during the summer, anyway.
Yeah, I think we were the closest to them, and Mother and Daddy Mother was close to Van Schroeder, Spalding Schroeder's wife. The other founders, I think we had them over to dinner some, but we didn't really hang out with them. Of course, Willis Hurst. I mean, we knew a lot about Willis and his children, and I still see his son, one of them, playing golf.
Well, we weren't allowed to go anywhere but Emory. So, I think Piedmont Hospital, if you had an emergency, we would go to the Piedmont emergency room. And of course, Grady was in operation. But I don't remember any clinics per se.
Just that I thought all the doctors in the clinic taught in the university, in the medical school.
Okay, and what about research? Did anybody talk about?
Well, Daddy he always had these slides on the breakfast room table every morning. I think he had those slides because he was going to go show them to his fellows, but they were these old-fashioned slides. It seems like he was always doing research, and he was always reading medical journals. I mean, his whole office was nothing but medical journals, and then when we got enough, they'd go get them all bound together so they'd be a book. So I know he did a lot of research. Well, I think they brought in such innovation, with the stent, with Grunsig and the stent, and they had was Hatcher the first surgeon to really perform kind of miraculous procedures. I mean, I think they had the best care, and maybe Daddy would talk about Texas, and who was that guy in Texas that did the first heart transplant?
DeBakey.
Yeah, probably.
Was that his name? Dr. Abbott was the first heart surgeon,
Osler
I
Abbott.
believe, Osler Abbott, who died very early. I mean, probably in his 50s. But we still know the Abbotts. And I remember Papa talking about Dr. Abbott.
Oh, there were a lot of stories about Daddy. I mean, I meet people all the time that would say he was the fastest diagnostician in the world. He could just put the stethoscope on your heart and he could diagnose. He diagnosed my father-in-law on the phone talking to a doctor in Huntington, West Virginia, and said, you have to take him straight to Lexington for a heart surgery. He's getting ready to have an aneurysm. I mean, he was a supreme diagnostician. I know that.
He also, before the days of the treadmill, he would meet a patient on the first floor, and they would walk up 5 flights of stairs, and then he would check their heart. And that was before the days of getting on the treadmill. So I know lots of stories. Yeah, lots of stories like that. But he had endless energy, and there's no telling how many miles he would walk in a day going back and forth to the hospital through that tunnel.
He also, I think, he expected. He would be shocked if you had to go to a doctor now and wait. Which when sometimes I would go to my doctor at Emory, he would be furious because he would think it should be right on schedule. Everything should be right on schedule. Some of the doctors that he trained, like Charlie Wycliffe, who's a cardiologist, he constantly tells me that he would go to, he was one of Daddy's fellows, and he said he had this look, Bruce, can you do it? The grit look, where if you didn't get the answer right or you didn't get it quickly, he kind of had this gritted tooth look. He said we knew it was the Logue grit.
Yeah.
That the way he showed his disapproval. He was kind of famous for that.
Yeah.
He did it to us too.
He did it to me constantly.
He was totally into patient care and the importance of the patient and their needs and how they were feeling, and I know that he would be impatient with people having to wait, and probably with sometimes the lack of compassion that doctors show, less compassion for you. And
Yeah, and he made house calls.
oh yeah.
And people would come to our house, like
They did? Father?
Father. I remember him coming. So, if he had a patient that he knew and they wanted to see him, they would come to the house and he'd see him.
Or if he had a patient that had a need to see another doctor, he would make sure they saw that other doctor right away for a referral. He would not, he just never waited around for anything.
I think he would be, amazed at the number of surgeries and how successful they've been, not only at Emory, other hospitals too, and a lot of those doctors he trained. But I think that, that was such a big happening when they did the first heart surgery, and to the extent of the surgeries now and how successful they are. I think he would really be excited about that.
Yeah, he would be amazed at how much longer people can live and the kind of treatments they can get, and he would be so proud of Emory.
Well, I always, being a teenager, wanted him to have a really neat car, like Dr. Funk, orthopedic, had a Corvette, and he had a 4-door, unair-conditioned, blue, what was it?
Chrysler?
That was a Ford Falcon. Unair conditioned.
Oh, I hated that
All
car.
it had was a radio. And, I wanted him to have something really cool. And that wasn't him. So he would drive that from Brookwood Hills to Emory and park it in that garage. And that made him happy.
Yeah, he never really had a cool car, did he? He had a couple of Cadillacs, but the yellow Cadillac was kind of memorable.
Yeah, that was the epitome of his 2-door yellow Cadillac.
Well, possessions just weren't that important to him. He gave me the Ford when I got married.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I got that.
I think one of his patients gave my mother a Cadillac Seville.
He did.
And after that, I think is when he upgraded to his yellow Cadillac sedan DeVille, and two-door, and would drive that out to the golf range at Indian Trail. And I remember I was getting off 285 onto 85, and I saw him. My office was out there, and I tried to catch him. I never could catch up with him before he got off at Indian Trail.
Yeah, he was a pretty fast driver.
He would drive with one foot on the brake and one on the gas. So,
Like I said, he didn't wait for much.
when I'm referencing trying to catch up with him was 1990. So he kept cars for a long time.
Yes. Okay, so I have a daughter, Corinne, who's 49 and lives in California. I'm trying to think how she could have been. How did we decide she was inspired by Papa? My son is a woodworker, so he got Papa's tools when he stopped making furniture. He passed them on to my son, who is in real estate but loves to make tools.
Well, we could just say Corinne is a free spirit
She's a free spirit.
living in California.
Very busy and very athletic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my oldest daughter is Lisa, is 41, and she's a nurse at Piedmont in cardiac intensive care, and works with Dr. Hurst's son and Dr. Blinko and Charlie Wycliffe. So she works with people that trained under my father. And she has a daughter who's 9 years old. So we have a granddaughter. And then my oldest son is 39 and is a chef, which he got from my father, he says, growing up with the garden and the churning ice cream and cooking gourmet meals. My son went to New England Culinary Institute and has his own Italian restaurant in Inman Park called Boca Lupo. It's been open 2 years now. And then my youngest son is a music major from LaGrange College and realized he could not make a living in the music business, so he works for Publix supermarkets. And the chef has a 4-year-old son who is Robert Bruce Logue IV, and they call him Robbie. So we're continuing the Dr. Logue's senior's lineage with a fourth.
Right.
And then Bruce's wife, Anna, is expecting a girl in September, so we'll have a third grandchild. That's about it. I don't remember any nurses. I remember
Miss Caldwell.
Miriam Caldwell was our father's secretary at the time.
And she couldn't read
Administrative
his. She
assistant.
couldn't read his writing, so he had the dictaphone because his writing was horrible.
Yeah,
And you know, back then they had that dictaphone that she could get his
right.
type from.
But I don't remember any nurses.
Thank goodness we weren't in the hospital much. I had my tonsils out,
Right.
and I had 2 babies there at Emory. And that was about it.
Yeah, 2 of my children were born at Emory, my first 2. And Josh was born at Piedmont, so.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.